Only thing to say is no comment. Nobody is talking to the media.
The secretive company has also sold technology to Saudi Telecom, Kuwaiti Wataniya Telecom, and India's largest broadband provider, Sci-Fi. Internet spying is generally illegal in the U.S. Norris is one of several companies that sell internet tracking and spying technology. But there are no laws or regulations to govern the use and sale of these powerful tools. Carr says more transparency and oversight are needed.
We've been calling for a more thorough investigation of the uses and abuses of this technology. We hope here in the United States that Congress will investigate.
For now, though, protesters and critics of governments around the world should know Big Brother is watching. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, Sunnyvale, California.
Let's get some other news now. Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to a second ceasefire in as many days after renewed fighting in a disputed border region. Cambodian soldiers and Thai forces exchanged gunfire near a contested 900-year-old temple. One Thai soldier died in the exchange. 3 other soldiers and a civilian were killed in the violence on Friday. At least 5 people have died in Sri Lanka after widespread flooding caused by days of torrential rain. Hundreds of thousands have been affected, and the country's disaster management centre is struggling to cope. Manel Fernandez reports from Colombo.
The waters raged once again, sweeping everything in their path. Worst hit was the north-central province. Swollen irrigation tanks breaching their banks. One reported to have unleashed around 55,000 cubic acres of water. Many villagers were cut off by the floodwater, boats their only hope. Over 1 million people have been affected, and more than 230,000 have been forced to leave their homes for temporary shelters. In the Central Highlands, authorities issued a landslide alert and declared a state of emergency in some areas.
Our kitchen was buried by a landslide at the back of the house.
It wasn't just people facing hardships. This baby elephant was among the wildlife caught by rising waters. The military and police are helping with the rescue and relief efforts. But despite the devastation, there were some moments of hope. This baby born on a helicopter as her mother was flown to safety. In Colombo, charities are trying to gather food and clothing to send to victims. But they face a major problem delivering this aid, as many roads are impassable. Emergency supplies and food stocks are being loaded up behind me to be taken to the hundreds of thousands of people affected by this latest round of flooding. But it'll take a whole lot more for those affected by this latest disaster to get on their feet again. Manel Fernandez, Al Jazeera, Colombo.
Australia continues to feel the effects of one of the biggest ever cyclones to hit the country. The giant storm first struck Queensland, but its tail is being felt thousands of kilometres away in the southern state of Victoria. Wild storms lashed the city of Melbourne, bringing destructive winds and flash flooding. More than 175 millimetres of rain fell in just a few hours, also inundating rural areas. 3 Pakistan cricketers have been banned for a minimum of 5 years after being found guilty of corruption following a hearing in Doha. Salman Butt, Mohammad Asif and Mohammad Amir were charged with conspiring to bowl no balls during a test match against England last year. Rahul Patak reports.
Well, there were chaotic, almost jubilant scenes outside the Qatar Financial Centre as the 3 players involved attempted to leave earlier today following Saturday's decision. All 3 players essentially have been banned for 5 years each, but there's a real feeling here that the punishment handed down by Michael Beloff QC and his 2 colleagues could have been a lot more harsh.
The tribunal has recommended to the ICC certain changes to the code with a view to providing flexibility in relation to minimum sentences in exceptional circumstances.
Well, as for the players themselves, all 3 are said to be very disappointed with the decision, and Mohammad Amir, for one, has confirmed that he will instruct his lawyers to go ahead with an appeal. That will be heard by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Well, the next big date for the players is March the 17th. That's when they'll appear before Westminster magistrates in London. They'll be accused of accepting and obtaining corrupt payments. Now, that carries a maximum jail term of 7 years, an extremely serious charge there. But as for the International Cricket Council, well, does this punishment that was handed out today really send out the strong message that they were looking for at the beginning of this tribunal? Well, I think the jury's still very much out on that. Rahul Pathak, Al Jazeera, Doha.
Japan's national sport has been plagued by a match-fixing scandal of its own. 3 sumo wrestlers have admitted influencing bouts for thousands of dollars, and Japan's Sumo Association has now called off its March tournament, the first such cancellation in 65 years. Gambling and drug use have plagued Japan's sumo wrestling industry in recent years. In Côte d'Ivoire, thousands have voiced their anger at the involvement of Burkina Faso's president in attempts to resolve the post-election crisis. Youths loyal to incumbent President Laurent Gbagbo refused to step down after Alassane Ouattara was ruled the winner of November's election. Gbagbo supporters are suspicious of Blaise Compaoré and the African Union's involvement. Tens of thousands of Serbs gathered in central Belgrade earlier for the biggest anti-government rally seen there for years. The protest was headed by the Serbian Progressive Party, a centre-right organisation formed from the Serbian Radical Party. Protesters are calling for early elections, higher wages and a crackdown on corruption. Finally, 87 years after his death, Russian communist leader Vladimir Lenin will be buried. His embalmed body has been on display in Moscow's Red Square since 1924. Neve Barker has more from the Russian capital.
Red Square, the heart of Russia, a venue for rock concerts, fashion shows and in the winter months a giant ice rink. But at this heart is also a graveyard where the great and good of the Soviet Union are buried. But no tomb is greater or grander than that of Vladimir Lenin. Shortly after his death, Lenin's embalmed body was brought here to lie in state forever. But this year, 87 years after the revolutionary leader died, a poll was held. 70% of respondents said it was time for Lenin to go. Opponents of the mausoleum have described its presence here as an absurdity. There have also been some strong words from religious groups. The Council of Muslims said the mummified body should be turned over to the communists for pagan worship, while the communists have described those who want to evict Lenin as tribal homegrown pygmies. Emotions are running high.
All these pyramids and mummies, they're ridiculous. Russia is an Orthodox country.
We must always remember him. If we bury him, we'll forget about him too quickly.
Whatever the outcome, the little red pyramid will remain. There's talk of turning it into a museum. Most experts agree that what's inside there is not Lenin's real body. Only about 10% of it's left, the rest removed a long time ago. Still, at the expense of Russian taxpayers, embalmists regularly take the body away for a touch-up. Well, the big question is, what did Lenin want? Historians say that he wanted to be buried alongside his mother in St. Petersburg. Well, the Kremlin haven't given their opinion on the matter, but many people here in Russia believe that now is the time to say goodbye to Lenin. Neve Barker, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
Now, the British Prime Minister says the decades-old policy of multiculturalism has failed in the UK. David Cameron argued that the UK lacks a strong national identity, and he accused leaders of minority communities of tolerating behaviour that promoted segregation and ultimately extremism. His words have angered some Muslim groups and came as the far-right English Defence League was holding a major demonstration in the town of Luton.
Under the doctrine of state multiculturalism, we've encouraged different cultures to live separate lives apart from each other and apart from the mainstream. We failed to provide a vision of society to which they feel they want to belong. We've even tolerated these segregated communities behaving in ways that run completely counter to our values.
Well, for the moment, that's it from me, Darren Jordan. I'll be back at the top of the hour with more from the Egyptian capital, Cairo, where the working week is getting underway and what's expected to be a 13th day of protest, particularly focused again on Tahrir Square in the centre of the Egyptian capital. But for now, we'll leave you with some images from the last 24 hours in Egypt.
OIMG! Let's go!